Welcome to MAP, the bi-weekly market access podcast hosted by me, Dr. Stefan Walzer. I am the innovator of Market Access 4.0 and a health economist by training and working in the fields of market access, reimbursement, pricing, and health economics since 2004. Discover Market Access 4.0 and unveil the future with our innovative solutions. Max Insights, our fast and easy AI-based reimbursement planning platform. Dobo, our new revolutionizing way of creating reimbursement dossiers across the globe with the first and only dossier writing AI bot. Cubo, our new AI-based objection handling platform. And Waffle, train with Waffle's virtual reality genius in an immersive environment and with an AI-based counterpart. We are Market Access 4.0, so check out our website, marketaccess4-0.com. And now let's dive into the current discussions, processes, and trends in market access across the globe. Welcome to another show of the Market Access podcast. Today, I'm very delighted to have Cuno Moser as my guest. Whoever does not know Cuno, of course, he will also introduce himself in a second. But Cuno is a Swiss healthcare strategist and a digital health expert who works where technology, Medtech, market access, and healthcare transformation meet. He spent years helping innovators move from promising ideas to real adoption and practice, which makes him an ideal voice for conversation Europeans' innovation paradox. And we'll come back to that in a second. Welcome, Cuno.
Hi, Stefan. Glad to be here. Thank you very much for your kind introduction.
Very good. Perfect. So jumping directly into what I read on one of your latest LinkedIn posts, I mean, you said Europe is somewhere in an innovation paradox in healthcare. Can you explain the listeners what you mean or what has been meant with that?
Yeah, well, Europe produces excellent research in medical innovation, right? But rarely manages to turn that into scalable business models and care delivery solutions. That breakdown happens precisely at the transition from pilot projects into broad deployment. And that's less a problem of the idea, it's a problem of system design or systemic problem, incentives and executions. So three pillars which are not balanced or missing. I would say like this.
Yeah, and I presume, depending on which part of Europe you live, I think everybody of us has already experienced that. I think the science part, I would agree, is probably not the issue generally. I think we have good scientists, we have good academic centers. I think we have good underlying kind of research. But I mean, from your experience, what is your recommendation then as well? I mean, you have just laid out a couple of the issues where maybe the idea is not the issue. So how could we really get into a real execution where I personally believe pilots are probably still needed, but that's probably just where everything being stuck in Europe, right?
I mostly can determine or say something about healthcare industry where I'm coming from, right? Rather less about clinical research and stuff like this. But we have like excellent basic, clinical institutions, good data quality, not everywhere for sure, but in general, I would say. But what's really missing are, in my opinion, are the incentives for execution. A scaling infrastructure for sure, which allows also in this age of AI, right, to adopt in a compliant and safe space use cases. It's also very much missing, and often the right capital market access as well. Capital is not everything. Don't get me wrong, it's really crucial, but not capital alone doesn't scale businesses, startups as such. But the innovation gets stuck in pilots or gets acquired by US companies and scaled somewhere else. That's something which we observe often when it comes of startups out of Europe.
Yeah, and I assume you're probably speaking quite broadly here, right? I mean, for any kind of, let's say, IT-based kind of innovation in maybe the medtech area, especially, right? I mean, it's not only the latest AI solutions, I presume, where my kind of key question was also, I mean, when we were also following, let's say the last year, especially maybe the last 2 years, I think the investment, as you also just put the capital in there, in the US and also in China, is of course a lot more focused into the AI infrastructure. Is that maybe as well the kind of point? But that might maybe be anyway needed for a real execution or for a real move from pilot into full usability into the market, or is that maybe a bit too easy to say?
I don't know if I got the question right, but in general, when it comes to this hurdle of fragmentation in Europe, which is also among these 3 pillars I mentioned, that's one of the biggest challenges, because we have 27 different reimbursement schemes throughout Europe, also alone in Switzerland, right? We have almost 26 different systems, which are leading to barriers, hurdles, which has to be overcome in order to innovate. And this is a huge barrier there, which has to be solved. That's basically one thing. And other than that, as an entrepreneurial mind, I would say it's always... I'm a fan of not having too much influence, governmental influence, because the free market has to play to some extent, right? But on the other hand, in that field, in that highly regulated space, that has to be incentivizations, or at least also Leitplanken, which has to be set by the government. Otherwise, the playing field is too unstructured, and therefore that leads to hurdles which are not affecting innovation in a good way. Yeah. And this has to be overcome.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And this is maybe rather as a kind of question, is it so different in the US and China? Do you know that?
When it comes to innovation, lot of those European startups are moving over there because of scalability, and especially in that regard also about speed. And they can scale much faster in the US, for instance, and that's why they move mostly over there, and that's also where the capital lies, right? But and that's especially in these times, right? Geopolitical times. It's really sad, as I may say that as a European citizen. It's sad to see this talent and also opportunity drain going over there, or in whatever region in the world. And this is a bit of unfortunate drain, I would call it. And that's something it would be good if we can keep them here, and in that regard we need to consider what has to be changed in order to keep them here. And one thing is definitely to reducing the burden of innovation, and therefore we're coming back to these 3 pillars I mentioned before: incentivization, execution, and the system design. And and my hope is that AI there can help a lot to reduce, because it's I compare it a bit of it's a bit of matchmaking, right? Not every when we come back to startups, not every investor, for instance, or VC is the right counterpart for every startup, right? It might be that a startup, I don't know, from Switzerland would fit best to a VC from Netherlands, maybe, or something. But they has to be match-made first, right? And how to get there could also help to solve such a hurdle. But as I mentioned, in addition, there are coming these political barriers also up. So it's also about market know-how, market knowledge. It's about mapping the landscape of health economics, for instance, or reimbursement landscape, to know what's out there and to help these institutions and startups to scale in order to let them know where to play best and first. That could also help to innovate or accelerate their scale.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. I mean, it is of course complex. I mean, you mentioned already a couple of different things, right? I mean, it's of course capital, especially let's say at the early beginning, to raise capital as well, in order then to really maybe even get just to the pilot even. But even the pilot, I think, is of course very important, because I think also, as you said, it's also there a kind of matchmaking to find the right kind of market for the execution thereafter. I mean, maybe it doesn't make sense to run a pilot in one country because the opportunity to get onto the full market thereafter might just be much more complex, right? I mean, what I'm asking myself a lot of times is rather, I mean, I'm not a Chinese expert, but I mean, having a look on the US, I mean, the US is also not just simply a market, right? I mean, every state has still their own rules and regulations and government and all that kind of stuff. So yes, of course, it's a lot easier, and that clearly capital is there. I think there's a much more liberal and open capital market, let's say. Hence, I think this is, of course, easier. But if you want to, let's say, also scale in the US, you need a lot of capital. So you need a lot of money as well. So is it not just, let's say, a kind of a question where you really want to move over, because you could potentially as well start somewhere in Europe, having, of course, then the knowledge what you just brought up in terms of, I don't know, funding opportunities, market access, the right customers, and all of the like. I mean, is it not more or less the same, but maybe people might just rather choose then the capital first, and because a lot of capital might be coming out of the US, hence they are moving into the US, or is that too simple to say?
It's a very good question. I also ask myself a lot of times. It also goes into the direction of a paradox, actually, I would say, to come back to that. I guess it would help if people or founders ask themselves honestly and at the first glance how they want to scale, right?
Yeah.
Is it about a fast scaling or rather organic one? And if you have, like, I don't know, and I know also from my own experience, it's tempting to go in a fast growing direction because everyone wants to speed up, and maybe also some investors are pushing in that direction or whatever. But in the long run, it's worth asking ourselves how we want to grow, right? In what speed we want to grow. How the future business model and growth should look like, and therefore having this as a kind of an influence how to decide in which direction we want to strive. I would respond on the question like this.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, no, I think
and
that
also
makes sense.
it's a really personal decision, maybe.
Yeah.
Also in that time, I don't know if I didn't make the study or something like this, but when you go back, I don't know, ask a bunch of startup founders 5 years ago the same questions, and a bunch of five these days, maybe not all of these five would respond the same way, right? Also because of other impacts, right? Like this geopolitical world situation we are in at the moment, right? So all this has also an impact which we didn't capture or cover yet in this discussion.
Yeah, no. I again agree. I mean maybe again another point what you also just mentioned beforehand, which is, let's say, I think you named it. I think I cannot find it in my notes now, but I think kind of market opportunity or market readiness, maybe. I mean, if we have a look on, let's say, the reimbursement systems, and my own experience, I think, especially with digital health, so DiGAs in Germany, for example, is, I mean, more or less exactly as you said, right? I mean, you might maybe even have one market there, like Germany, but let's say the other 26 markets, most of them at least, are not really ready to adopt. This is just where maybe Germany might be a better way to go. But we also have had other discussion, right, where DiGA is not a very perfect way to go anyway. But anyhow, it's just more as well showing already, maybe you have one market and across Europe, and the others are getting difficult. Very similar experience we had with telemonitoring, for example, with or without AI in the last 2-3 years, but it's the same kind of discussion. I think codes are not yet there. It takes a long time until you get the codes. Hence, how do you want to move forward? And I think going back to the paradox of what we just said, US versus Europe a couple of minutes ago, there maybe it's a bit easier because not in all, but with some, let's say, direction or in some directions, you could, especially in the US, utilize already one or the other code, which is, let's say, already available. Maybe on a lower level, but at least there's some cash already flowing. And even more important, usage with physicians/patients could potentially as well already occur, which is a key difference in Switzerland, in Europe, as well as in Switzerland, right?
Yeah. Going back to this political discussion before of having this playground set by the governmental, could this top-down approach, let's call it that way, this top-down approach can help to solve a lot of issues there. By definition, and also I truly believe in there has to be like a free market play that is regulating everything in its way and speed, but as a fundamental basis, there has to be a overlay or outlay of governmental rules which allows to play within there, right? So that leads me to measures like interoperability, because data has to be everywhere and in place, otherwise innovation will just not happen, right? So this is something, or also these reimbursement schemes you mentioned as well. All these things has to be set or defined, or at least predefined or codified by governmental institutions, health economical players out there. But it's a very complex. I'm aware of that. It's a very complex field, that's for sure. Nevertheless, it has to be co-created. Otherwise, it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna work. It has. What do I mean with co-creation? I mean a co-creation between players or parts of health economics, startups and organizations, but also from research which know what way would eventually be the best to go with. And that can help.
Yeah. And this one probably is special, let's say, also across countries, if we stick to Europe.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, definitely. Yeah. We already raised the point of a very fragmented environment, right? And it doesn't play a big role whether we are talking about Switzerland in a very small setup or in a broader scale about Europe, right? It's basically not the same for sure, but it's comparable in that regard. And there we need some initiatives. And when it coming back to the data part, there are a lot of initiatives out there which are good, I would say, like this European health data space or Swiss health data space. For sure, practical reasons or practical measures are showing also it's not that easy to go there, definitely. Just as the very recent response or very recent fact in Switzerland, where the governmental approach of DigiSante has been stopped due to different reasons. Yeah. But in general, when it comes top down, that's the only approach which which can work on a long run, in my opinion.
So I mean, maybe being a bit provocative, and I'm a big fan of Europe in general, right? But I mean, knowing the whole kind of bureaucracy across Europe and including any kind of different countries, is what you said, the long run, the way we need to look for, even for those innovation, or is there a hope maybe to get a couple of other things maybe fixed earlier and faster, especially as you already said, in the current kind of environment? Geopolitical is one thing, but also the economic situation as of now.
Yeah. I don't know what to add there, but
yeah, that's okay. I mean, as we already probably said, right? I think top down, I think is important. The question is also a bit on speed, right? I mean, especially let's say when we speak to companies. I mean, we all know that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe something. I mean, going back to this. Just to follow up on this European data platform, Swiss data platform, however, which is the fundamental basis for innovation. There, the architecture, the technical stuff, basically is being designed, right? But if participation, I especially can describe it from Switzerland, but if participation stays voluntary, I don't know how effective and innovative and successful the entire approach will be, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So
also something.
Have you heard anything in that direction, maybe especially on the political side, to maybe turn that around, that it's not voluntary, but of course, let's say whoever does not want to, let's say, be part of it could, let's say, withdraw their participation, which is a different approach, right? And we have seen that in various areas. If you turn it in that way, a lot of more participants would be in such kind of endeavors. I mean, I haven't heard so, but I'm not too much into both of those areas, whether on the European nor on the Swiss. I mean, I'm hoping that everything, let's say, is moving into real good execution direction, because then we can, of course, from our side, market access reimbursement side, of course, utilize a lot from that kind of space, of course.
Yeah. One thing in that regard, we are ending up very soonish in the field of standards, right? Technological standards, which are the fund, in my opinion, and I guess not only in my opinion, but also in the opinion of a lot of health economic players, are the fundamental of such infrastructure. I mean, what is the option of not using standards? The option is basically, in my opinion, there is no option, but the real option there, or another option, would be a highly capital intensive option, meaning buying, I don't know, big infrastructures from, I don't know, hyperscalers or whomever, to solve such big data problems throughout Europe. But in that regard, it's a highly political discussion. I'm aware of that. We are ending up in other regulated fields, such just as a buzzword. Cloud Act, for instance, which is affecting that field, and missing exit strategies, etc. So, in my opinion, there is no option of standardization of interfaces, using them to come up with such infrastructures. And as I already mentioned, it's very crucial, in my opinion, to have it like with a certain necessity, with a certain to make it not, how did I mention, voluntary. It has to be
It's probably more
verpflichtend.
It's more a mandatory step, right?
It's more a mandatory step.
Yeah, it's more mandatory, having the right, of course, to maybe withdraw, but I think the likelihood then is just a lot higher that people are basically staying in the system, let's say, right?
Indeed. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure now, going a bit further to the system manufacturers or solution manufacturers out there, all these big companies developing information solutions to digitize Europe, to all them. What I observed, they have also changed their mind very drastically within the last 10 years. They literally moved from data hiding to data providing in terms of, in other industries, this approach of open innovation is out there for decades already, almost, right? And they realized they can broaden up their business development potential very much if they open themselves to other players, and using such interoperability standards and connecting to other players, connecting to other care providers, institutions, in order to accelerate and let them their business grow. And they really observed that or realized that, and that's what I meant with this Leitplanken in the beginning, right? If you allow all the players to play within a certain field of playground without any rules in there, that can emerge a lot of potential when it comes to innovation and scalable growth. But until there has to be this field set up. Otherwise, it's not gonna work decently, I would say.
No, I agree with that. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's what is known in economics since a long time, right? Is more the kind of right regulatory policy, or in German, it's Ordnungspolitik, right? I mean, if you give the right frame and everything within that frame can be, let's say, very liberal, I mean, there you see most of the innovation happening. But I mean, the smaller you, of course, frame it, the less innovation can, of course, happen. Or if you have more frames just adding up there, of course, the more complex it gets, right? But maybe just turning a bit into a company perspective, right? We have spoken quite a bit on the system level. I mean, if you would be approached by, let's say, a healthcare company from wherever, maybe from within Europe, what would be your kind of recommendations, how they should prepare or move into the European space in the broadest sense?
It's a very good question, in my opinion. I would tend to mention these pillars from before, asking themselves what are the truly clinical benefits they want to provide with their solution. I mean, it depends on what stage they are. Maybe I have to re-ask this first to you. But in general, let's, consider a startup or whatever. Really matching a clinical benefit first, having there a fast return on invest when it comes to financial invest, but also other KPIs which they want to achieve. It has to be integrated in their solution, has to be integrated very well in the clinical workflows, meaning also integrated into existing solutions, into existing infrastructures, as we have discussed it before with the standards, and for sure an economic relevance, right? At least in Switzerland and Germany and other countries surrounding us, the health economic system is the following: that they have to follow a certain revenue model or a certain revenue logic, and therefore they has to be aligned with that to some extent, right? They cannot just spend money for the sake of, having good clinical workflows or so, etc. But in general, first you need to solve really clinical issues, having clinical benefits in place, and then you can emerge. That brings me, sorry for discussing a bit too much, but just want to drop stuff from my mind to get rid of it. When it comes to this AI thing, we are also supporting at the moment a larger hospital in Europe, which is at the edge of, they know everybody's using AI, right? Including their care providers, etc. Everybody's using AI in their way, in their manner, and not all these manners are compliant, right, with the organizational structures, and therefore they need to have also there within the organization. Until now in the discussion, we were just discussing the broader scale of Europe, but also within the organization, they need to have a kind of a playground which is compliant and a kind of a safe space for the employee to play around with AI, and in additionally maybe to develop their own AI use cases. And this is releasing a lot of potential when it comes to clinical benefits. Just thinking of, I don't know, ambient scribe solutions in healthcare, etc. This was literally disrupting administrative work burden. Before we were like thinking of, let's automate, I don't know, workflow structures on a technical level. But it literally, AI came up and AI literally leapfrogged all these steps before and came with solutions that literally help to reduce this burden in a feasible and concrete way, and not just by a low percentage amount, but by, I don't know, 40, 50, 60% of working hours has been reduced by the help of AI there, and that's significant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a very good kind of comment and example, of course, as well. I mean, we're moving towards the end, and I always like to end in a positive way. And I think last minute's already very positive. I would agree. I mean, having something complex sometimes sounds difficult and maybe sometimes too negative, but ultimately there are always, let's say, different good examples and so on. But maybe rather bit, let's say, forward-looking. Where do you see the biggest opportunity, maybe in the next 5 years, across Europe and, of course, including Switzerland as well?
The biggest opportunity, that's a good question, lies, in my opinion, in translating Europe's structural strengths, or also Switzerland's, which is trust, regulatory quality, and clinical expertise, into a competitive advantage, or into competitive strength, and trust-based health platforms. It's really about that. No single player can solve all these issues we were gathering this session together alone. So it's really a co-creational approach, which has to be aligned somehow, maybe through the help of AI. AI can help to rearrange this, help to matchmake and connect the dots. And that's one thing. And I really hope for Europe to end up competitive, meaning not having not that there is not a need to look too much into other geopolitical regions anymore, because we have set up a competitive landscape until then. And to end up with a defensible advantage, basically.
Which makes sense. I mean, I have the feeling that things are moving in that direction, and I hope for that, of course, as well.
Maybe one last thing. I guess Europe won't win on speed, as we discussed in the beginning. Definitely not. But it can win on trust, maybe, right? So
agree.
Is something on trust and quality. That's where we are strong at. And I guess it's always worth to focus on what we have and not what we don't have, right? It's a bit of heritage and legacy maybe as well there.
Yeah, I love that towards the end. I think this is really perfect. I agree. I think speed is one thing, and I think Europe has never been really on the speedy way. But I agree with you. I think quality and trust, and that's maybe even what we need more, especially in the years to come with AI and all of the other kind of discussions we just had as well. Cuno, that was great insights. I learned a lot. Thank you for your time, and then hopefully talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Stefan. I was glad to be with you today.
Great new podcast session today with Cuno Moser. Cuno is very strong in his background, of course, from a technical perspective and also with his experience across Europe, including Germany and Switzerland. And I think the key discussion, the key point was very clearly heard. I think we need to get rid of that, as he called it, European paradox, which is, let's say, kind of stuck in a pilot where the ideas are not getting finally to the market. Of course, let's say a couple of those pieces we know already since quite a long time, which is sometimes rather, let's say, differences between markets. Think a bit about market access, reimbursement, which are, of course, still different across various, let's say, countries. We see nowadays in the drug area, but also then from 2030 onwards for most, at least, of the Medtech products as well, the endeavors into joint clinical assessment, which is maybe a starting point, but ultimately, especially when we speak and think a bit about IT kind of products, especially let's say in the AI area, we might not be affected by JCA at that point in time. I think ultimately, very important is probably to get the right kind of frames, the right kind of economic frames, and then within those, I think we should also allow, of course, to have the companies, the providers being, let's say, quite flexible and quite open in order then to innovate. That's not a big surprise. I think ultimately also, which is important, the kind of key question is, also Cuno said it, at different points in time, maybe the speed is the question, but maybe speed is not everything. This can be taken from an investor's perspective, where we maybe have the discussion having a fast versus an organic kind of scaling, which is the long run, which maybe then also matters. And of course, that's the same if we speak about the system level across the European members. Maybe, as he said, and I love that, it's not speed where we can win. It's rather about quality and trust. That was an episode of MAP, the Market Access podcast provided by Mars Market Access and Pricing Strategy, which is your healthcare consultancy in the German-speaking markets. MAP is available every second week with a new episode, so watch out. And in case you might have questions, contact me directly and or visit our website on www.marketaccess-pricingstrategy.de.